So, welcome to They Think It's All Sober, Suzanne Shaw.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm a fan. I'm a huge fan.
My hometown hero.
I know.
Hometown hero.
High Wycombe.
High Wycombe.
Yeah.
Big ups.
I did panto in High Wycombe this year.
Did you? I was going to ask this because I was walking down the high street like in December and I looked
saw
up and
you.
I was like, Suzanne, because we don't know each other, we've never met, but
Never.
like I feel like we really know each other.
I know, because I know your best friend.
Yes.
I go to the gym with him.
Yeah.
We live in the same area. It's so weird. It's so weird.
so odd, and
Yeah.
we finally brought it together
Yeah.
to a podcast chair.
Here we are.
How was Panto?
Panto was great. Yeah. I mean, 4 weeks, 2 shows a day. Then you get exhausted. Then you're like, thank God Panto's over.
Had you done Panto before?
I think that was my 19th panto.
Wow.
So I've done it a lot before.
You are like Panto queen.
Do you know
I
got
am Biggins.
Do you know I've got a phobia of the panto?
What do you mean?
phobia
What
of
do you?
panto.
What do you hate? Joy?
every time my wife takes Little, she's like, she just doesn't ask me anymore.
Why have you got a phobia of panto?
I don't actually know. I think like I might have been involved in some sort of like
He once got beaten up by-
participation when I was a kid and hated it.
Yeah, maybe you asked to go up on stage as one of the
Yeah.
kids and you had to do, and you got incredibly humiliated.
I reckon you once
or-
got too fucked up and woke up with Widow Twanky.
And that is the soundbite to this episode.
There we go. But tell you what, if you're doing it again this year,
That's it. You are definitely coming
I'll-
to watch me in panto.
I'll bring Zach and I'll do it. I'll get over my panto.
and we'll get you up
phobia.
on stage.
Get me up on stage. Let me
Such
deal
a
with
Relive
it.
it
niche
all.
phobia.
Mate,
It's
I
such a
know.
weird phobia.
Anyway,
Well, as in like, no, I'm not letting this go just yet.
No,
so
it's
as in
not
like,
about
if
me
you
this
were-
episode.
If you were to sit there, like you would feel anxious and overwhelmed.
if I was going to the panto tonight, my heartbeat would be up.
Wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Is it? Do you not like having to say it's behind you? Does that make you cringe or make you
it's
feel
giving me-
weird?
My hair's going in.
Really?
They are.
They are.
Tom's hairs are
weird.
stood
Anyway,
up.
we'll tackle that issue this year. We'll come. But your 19th panto.
Yeah. It was good, a lot of fun. It was just good to be home. Although, what I will say, and I'll try not to be too negative about it, because it was brilliant and I really did have a really good time. But being at home doing 2 shows a day was really difficult because I was doing the school run. I did like a gym session in between,
shit.
like one of them with like my sparkles on. Then go back to the theatre. So normally I'm away, so I just have to look after me, and that's my one responsibility is just for me to get through 2 shows a day. But doing it at home, it was literally life was still going on,
Yeah, I bet.
and doing 2 shows.
And
it
popping
was
home in between shows.
Wow.
yeah,
and-
cooking, seeing it, making sure everyone's fine. Literally, I think I said in the show, like I had to do the cooking, the cleaning, and 2 shows a day. I didn't think it through.
Yeah, that is a lot.
That's
Absolutely didn't.
intense. But well, we're really excited to have you on, and I think like we have guests on from all walks of life.
Yes,
and
yeah.
I think you have done and / are doing everything from pop star
Yeah.
to actress to panto to cleaning and cooking at the same time.
What doesn't she
multitasking
do?
is
Yeah,
my thing.
what don't you do? But we're really excited to have you on,
Yeah.
and as always in this podcast, I think we explore the kind of theme and role and function that alcohol has played during your life,
Yeah.
and brought you to stopping drinking,
Yeah.
and how life's been since.
Yeah.
But as always, what we normally do is take a little step into Jamie's time machine,
Yeah.
and we travel back and just explore, I guess, the function of alcohol growing up. So, Jamie, if you please.
I'm nervous about this because I feel like someone that's been in Panto, that I feel like a time machine noise at a Panto would be quite amazing.
She's done a judgy to make it good.
Okay.
And you're back.
And you're back.
Oh my God.
And Suzanne's childhood. Can you believe it?
Oh my God.
You're in Hackney.
I grew up in
Why am I
Hackney.
here? Yeah. So, growing up, young Suzanne, how was alcohol? What's your first memories of alcohol?
Do you know what? I'm really glad you have done that, because I'd never talked about my relationship with alcohol from childhood.
Mm-hmm.
And it's something I've been thinking about a lot recently, and how unhealthy it was back then, how I didn't like being around it. My mum was never really been a drinker. She never really drank. She'd have like a sip of wine and she gets all giddy and her cheeks go red.
Yeah.
So she's never really been a fan of it. She'd drink every now and again. She occasionally has a gin and tonic, but she is that ultimate person who could take it or leave it.
Yeah.
Why I didn't get that genetic is, it blows my mind.
Curse you.
However, my father, who unfortunately is no longer with us, did have a very unhealthy relationship with alcohol,
Right.
and it ruled his life. It made him temperamental. There were lots of fights between my parents as a kid, and that was all, I believe now, born from alcohol. And he was a big drinker. He wanted to be a professional footballer, and I think he played for Rochdale, like did one professional game for Rochdale when he was younger. For those of you who don't know, I'm from Lancashire, so I grew up in Bury. So he played for Rochdale, but then I think his love for socialising, his love for alcohol got in the way, so he didn't get the dream of being a footballer, and then he went into videography, and he was a cameraman. Wow. And so, so all my life I've had a camera in my face. Like from the minute I've been born, I've had a camera in my face. And, that's what he did. And he filmed dance festivals. So whenever I was competing, he was called Vinny the Video Man. He'd film all the dancers. People would buy the tapes off him. And when you were a kid, your dance teachers would go, get your performance film so you could become better. You can improve on your performance. So he really did find a gap in the market. And he was very entrepreneurial. He had his own business. But alcohol played a big part in his life. It was a typical kind of northern family setup where, my mum, she was a nurse, and she would work evenings. And I would then be dropped off at my grandparents because he'd go out to the pub. He'd be often seen at the pub. He loved his football, but he equally loved theatre. And he was a very big drinker, yeah. So with that, I saw alcohol as what you had to do when you grew up.
Right.
But also I saw the dark side of alcohol and what it caused, the disruptions and the fractures that it would bring into that family setup.
Interesting. So I guess I always find that interesting when we have guests like that, because inherently so many of us have grown up in those environments knowing it's bad, yet still go on our own journeys. So I guess you've seen that at home and kind of seen the negative effects it can have. Yeah. Into your teenage years, when did you start to discover alcohol, and how did that play into kind of Suzanne's growth? Well,
there was always the drinking cabinet at home. So it was always on demand, it was there. And so when friends came over, I often would have a lot. I love being around people. So a lot of friends would come over for sleepovers. And I think when you're a teenager, when you're like 12, 13, 14, you start becoming curious. You just nick a little bit. And then when you're like more 14, 15, you start to hear about the house parties, and you go to house parties, it becomes a bit heavier. And then I do remember one time that my parents had split up when I was 14, and I took complete advantage of that. My mum lived in a place, and so when my dad would be away at weekends, or I just knew he wouldn't come home at night because he was out with his mates getting drunk, and generally would make a full weekend of it. I knew the house would be free, so we would have parties. And I do remember my dad coming home at one point, realising there'd been a party, opened the bin and went, bloody hell, they've been on the hard stuff, because we've been drinking vodka and whiskey. And it was like, well, it was all that was in the house. So it came into my life at a really young age. I'd definitely say kind of the first start of experimenting was probably 13, 14. And then 14, 15, I was well on my way to, those big nights out of binge drinking. And that was a thing. It was the ladette culture. Yeah. And it was binge drinking, being able to down it, being able to keep up with the boys. It was just very much that era.
So whilst like perhaps in hindsight unhealthy, probably quite typical though at the time. So nothing for you to kind of look back on and be like, it was comparatively to everyone else, it was probably quite normal.
Yeah, I was doing just everything that my mates was doing. There was no difference really. There was no like, my relationship was bad then. It was just very typical teenager.
Yeah. I think we grew up in that era as well. I think we're all similar-ish age of like, before we talk about this quite a lot on the podcast, like kind of before camera phones fully existed, before everything was captured, and there was just this notion of like everything was just a bit more chaotic back then, or so it felt. And like you say, celebrated in mainstream culture. I kind of think about the mid-90s and Liam Gallagher and Robbie Williams and everyone in the paper. It was like
absolutely, and it wasn't shame to fall out of a nightclub and be sick. You know, that was the done thing.
Yeah, it was just normal.
Yeah, and to follow a night out with going to the kebab shop and, you know, that was my life for so long. Like, and because I got into Hearsay at such a young age, in my late teens, it really did carry over as just that's what I did in my teenage years. I carried it over, and when we had the time, it was going out to the nightclubs and doing what the other pop stars were doing, which was drinking a lot and falling out of a nightclub and getting pictured.
Yeah. I guess let's talk about that then, that amazing journey you had into, I guess, arguably one of the first mainstream music TV shows that kind of broke an artist, right? Was that always your dream? And what was that journey like? And I guess more importantly for the podcast, how did alcohol play into that whole experience?
See, it's a funny one really, because believe it or not, I didn't drink that much when I was in Hearsay. We didn't have that much time. You know, we were recording 24/7. We were doing interviews. It was just so full on. I know the boys tend to go out to the pub and have a few pints. But really, unless it was a planned night out or we were invited to an event or we had a day off the night afterwards, we didn't really go out and drink. There just wasn't that much time for it. I remember moved into the Popstars house when I was 19, and we had a period of like about 4 months before we were announced as a band. So we had to hide away in this house. I say house, a mansion in like Mill Hill in London, with tennis courts and a well. I remember it had a well.
Amazing.
We were like behind, like it was like studio screens. We'd had to put these screens on so we could film. So we were constantly in the dark. We lived in this house. We had to hide away. Anywhere we went, we had to have caps and glasses on. We were chauffeured everywhere.
Wow.
And so you couldn't go out. You weren't allowed out. And we didn't really buy drink in. I don't remember there being like bottles of wine brought in, because really my relationship with alcohol back then was going out with my mates and having a drink, not drinking at home.
It's very social.
Yeah, very social. And so then when the band were announced, we then stayed in the house for a few months whilst we carried on recording the TV show. And then that came to an end, and we all found our own properties. And I moved into a flat in Hampstead, which was like literally my dream. It was amazing. Like I lived down the road from George Michael, and
amazing. And
just like every celebrity was in like the corner shop. It was incredible. Sean Bean was in the corner shop, and I remember my brother like coming back from the corner shop one time going, "Oh my God, Sean Bean's in the local shop." And it was like
amazing.
Absolutely loved his life. And I had a flatmate, and my flatmate, again, we used to grow up and go out drinking a lot. And she loved a glass of wine. And so she would often have wine in the house and would have really large glasses of wine whilst watching movies. And again, because we were working so much, I didn't really drink all that much unless it was really a planned night out. But then at the end, like coming towards the end of Hearsay, when we had more time, when we were doing less gigs, and that's when I noticed that I was potentially drinking a lot more than I was, yeah.
Interesting. And do you think so coming to the end of that time, so I guess within the context of Hearsay, there was a period of like huge success.
Yeah.
You know, you won Popstars, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so won that and very public facing. And yeah, I mean, I think it's the same with a lot of the kind of the groups that we've worked with from a production viewpoint. I know, you know, how busy they were and not have that time. So I guess towards the end of that period, did you notice drinking become problematic ever, or was it just there was more of it?
I just think there was more time to go out drinking. I didn't think it was problematic. And it was funny really, because when I was in the band, and lots of like journalists or even friends or acquaintances would say, you know, "Oh, did you see much drugs? Did you take drugs when, rock and roll?" You assume that the music industry is just full of it.
Yeah.
It is. However, I never saw any of that because we were working so much. Like, never did anybody offer me a line. Never did a fellow pop star, offer me drugs, or it wasn't there. I never saw it. I never saw that as a prominent thing. So again, completely missed all of it within that time in Hearsay. But towards the end, there was this one bar that we would often go to. So when the hype of the Hearsay time started to die down a little, and we had bit more time on our hands, we'd often go to a place called Pop Did you ever go to Pop?
No, where's that?
And it's in just off Oxford Street, and it was like this VIP bar, and the night was run by a company called Scintillate.
Right.
And it was guys called Glenn and Gary brothers who ran these VIP nights, and they'd be in like China Whites, they'd be in Pop, they'd be in like all the clubs, and they would run these nights, and you get invited to the VIP area, and they'd have just like bottles of vodka with cranberry juice or orange juice or Coke that you just with your mixers, and so you just drink that all night, but you could just pour like the largest measures, and then they'd just replace the bottle of vodka. And so often we'd go out for nights like that.
Yeah.
And they'd be heavy. They would be heavy. But I was single. I lived in a flat in London. I was 20 years old, 21 years old. And, you know, you were getting free drinks. You didn't have to pay for anything. It was, you just lapped it up. But never did I think it was a problem. Probably until much kind of later on in my life did I think it was a problem. I just thought it was the norm. I didn't drink any more than my other friends, the other band members. I probably just didn't handle alcohol as well as most.
Right.
Like, you know, I get quite sloppy and I would fall out of a club. I would be the one pictured. And yeah, so I think it was probably kind of later on that I started to realise that I was just drinking a lot more than, maybe not even a lot more than anybody else. I think I just hung out with people who've got really unhealthy relationships with alcohol. So I don't think I really noticed that I did, really. I think I was just in the crowd who kind of kept me in the drinking.
Interesting. I was going to ask about the function of alcohol for you at that time, because obviously kind of, you know, teenager growing up in the north of England, in Bury, going to a big TV show, suddenly become a pop star. Did the version of Suzanne at that point, is that what you always wanted to be? Was there ever a function of alcohol that helped in those scenarios, or were you just fucking loving life? Because
I just love life. You know, from being 3 years old, all I wanted to do was perform. That's all I ever wanted to do. I never expected to be in a pop band. What I thought my destiny would be going down the acting route. I was doing a lot of acting as a kid, musical theatre as well. And so for me, I was auditioning. I was in a TV show at 12, and then I was in Holby City. And so I did lots of like TV bits and pieces, and I had an agent from the age of 9. So I was working at such a young age, and I always thought that my destiny would to end up being an actress. And then it wasn't by accident that I auditioned for Hearsay, but I kind of went along with a mate who really wanted to be a pop star. And she was an amazing singer. She was really, really good. And I did not expect to get in the band. I just went along because, to be honest, you just auditioned for everything, really, apart from, you know, I wouldn't audition for porn, but, you know.
But like casting it out. And,
you do. You know, when you're a performer, there's lots of opportunities. You know, your agents or your dance teachers or your coaches would often say, go for it for the experience, to know what it feels like to audition, and that rejection. You know, you've got to get tough to it. So I just kind of went along. I did not expect to become a pop star, and that was insane. So that whole period was, it was a crazy time. But, you know, in terms of like, was there a drink or something that would get me through? It wasn't ever like that. I just love performing, and for so long it just wasn't a part of my life. Like I wouldn't say I was clean living. I loved to go out and have a drink. I would drink to fit in more than anything, rather than I was, you know, the drinker. Do you know what I mean? It was like you go along with what your college, like I went to performing arts college, and it was rife. They were smoking weed and they were like drinking, and I'd go along with it, and I hated it. I had a whitey the first time I had weed. It was awful. It was the worst experience of my life, and I never touched it ever again, apart from one time when I went to Amsterdam like about 6 years ago, and it was awful.
I feel like you never learn.
Then I remembered like why I don't do weed. But yeah, it was just my job. I just loved it. That was my focus. And it wasn't, like I said, it wasn't until after Hearsay, I think that's when alcohol became a much bigger part that I didn't even know it was creeping into my life. Right. I didn't know I was depending on it so much.
How was it navigating? So obviously having a period of like huge success, and then, you know, naturally as these things do, when the kind of hype, you know, so it started to die down a little bit. How did you cope with that? Because I think that's probably quite hard for a lot of people to go from being in the limelight, being a pop star, to suddenly maybe coming out of it slightly. How did it make you feel?
Yeah, and I think this is probably when I turned to alcohol from boredom.
Right.
Because I went from working 24/7 to having no job. And just going, hold on, what's happening with my life?
Yeah.
Like, this was meant to not be a 2-year stint. This was meant to be for much longer.
Yeah.
I didn't expect it to end so quickly. And so I was in a state of shock, because I did not want the band to split, but the rest did. They wanted to call it a day. And I just thought we had so much more to give. And we'd also recorded this incredible album in New York, and we had some really, really cracking songs on there. And it felt like such a shame to just let that go and not even see how it went. I think, you know, in hindsight, and I think the others would potentially agree, that we should have taken a break and then maybe come back in 12 months, 6 months time and, you know, went back out there. But everyone was miserable. No one was enjoying what they were doing. And I think it was just inevitable that we just had to stop and put a pause on it. We'd worked so hard. We were exhausted. We were burnt out.
Yeah.
And so when it stopped, I do remember I was dating a music producer at the time, and he loved to drink. And you can see the theme. I was gravitating towards people who love to drink.
Yeah.
And so every night we would just get really drunk. And not having anything to do and just get really drunk is dangerous for me. It is so, I need purpose, I need goals, I need stuff to look forward to. And so shortly after the band demised, I got offered a part in a musical to go on tour. And I accepted, because I knew it. I knew that world so well that I just thought, I'm going to go back into musical theatre, what I was doing before I got into Hearsay. And I think that was potentially just one big party for me. It was, again, like, I think from that moment the band split, that's now looking back is when I turned to alcohol as a coping mechanism, not just for fun, because I was using it out of boredom. I then had gone on to a show. You know, there's a lot of opinions about you. And when you go into a musical, people are expecting you to not be good or to fail. So there's so much you're contending with that. And I think just afterwards, I would just drink, you know, and we would go out, and I'd be on tour and everybody would be out drinking. So you would go out drinking.
Sure.
So you just went with the flow. And also I was using to cope and to just kind of block out the mind chatter and the noise and the worry of what are people's opinions of me going to be.
That's interesting. I mean, do you think that perhaps going from being in the limelight and a pop star back to musical theatre, you felt there was pressure? You felt like there might be more opinions because of that?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, still today I fight the whole, a pop star of the noughties, can they actually do their job? Are they actually any good? Can they actually sing? You know, that time, it was that era of, you know, singers not being able to sing. They were picked because they look good as a band. You know, you're fighting against that stereotype. And even today, I fight against that when people go, "Oh, actually, you're quite good, aren't you?" Like,
God,
I've been working since I was 3.
Thing, right?
It's so
like, oh wow, you're actually good. It's like, fuck, that's like my life's work.
I remember I was doing Chicago in the West End, and just before I went out on to do my very first performance, one of the guys that I ran onto stage with turned around to me and said, "It's so frustrating for us musical theatre performers. You know, just a celebrity can step in and take the lead role and they have no training at all." And then we ran out and we did the piece. And I was I was so frustrated. I was like, I have trained from the age of 3, but because obviously from being in a pop show, a reality show, the very first of its kind, the storyline was like they got these kids from the street who were singing in their hairbrushes in front of their mirror to suddenly then be on stage. Like, Kim was in the studio for years recording. Mylene was, a very brilliant musician. Noel was in a choir, and Danny had already been, singing for a long time. So we all had experience. But like I said, even today, you fight against that stereotype and those kind of ideas that people have of you.
Yeah, it's crazy, actually, the narrative that has to be built in order to build the show. And as we know now, 20 years on, you can look at it and see it for what it is. But I guess back then, we all probably fell into that trap of just looking at those reality TV shows and just assuming that it was what you said.
Well, it's like, I remember Will Young when did he win?
Yes. He won against Gareth, right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
And he'd been to Italia Conte, yet none of us knew about this. And again, it was that whole, he hadn't had any training, but he'd been to one of the best drama colleges in the country.
It's mad, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's just like public perception, because I think it was almost like the public loved the narrative of like the underdogs or the normal people that could suddenly be
the everyman.
Yeah, exactly. And it's we now know that it's just a lot of spin. Yeah. But it must have been frustrating for you, especially having a comment like that when you're going out.
I was going to say the first live murder committed on stage.
Well, the irony is the first part is where I shoot the man who says.
Brilliant.
So it was like a
method
staged
acting.
murder, and I was like, but it was so frustrating that has been the case, because when I got into Hearsay, I left school, I went to college, and then my plan was to apply for the drama colleges for university. I got into Hearsay before any of that. So because I don't have that on my CV as well, that's the whole, well, where have you trained? And it's like, just trained at home in Bury.
On stage at Wembley Arena, motherfuckers.
Yeah, that's where I fucking trained.
So you're touring, and you feel at this point alcohol's really starting to creep in.
Yeah.
How did that play out over the next 4 or 5 years into your career?
Yeah, well, I think that's when it just escalated into being known as this party animal, the person who could drink, even though it didn't suit me.
Right.
And that I didn't handle it very well. I would drink a lot. And again, like, the next person I attract into my life is Darren Day, known drug addict and big drinker. And then just kind of life got crazy, particularly within the media. Like, mine and Darren's relationship was plastered everywhere. But then I did fall pregnant, and obviously there was 9 months period longer that I didn't drink. And that time gave me that reflection of just seeing Darren's relationship with drink and drugs and how bad that was a little bit of a shock to the system. And that was a really crazy time, that whole period. And then again, it was then coming kind of into motherhood, and then very quickly becoming a single mum, and then kind of trying to navigate that. So there was a period of time where I wasn't drinking, and knew actually life was so much better when I wasn't.
Right.
And then you were just seeing like the chaos and the ugly that addiction was all about, and it just made me feel not well and not aligned and not right by seeing it. And again, kind of gave me that kind of very unsafe feeling, which I will relate back to my childhood. It didn't feel nice to be around. It wasn't great.
That's like, do you know what? There's obviously knowing about you, but that was a whole part that I think probably had read somewhere but not seen. So that must have been really chaotic to go from obviously like into that relationship, into the pregnancy, into motherhood. Yeah. How did you feel? Obviously you said you had the uncomfortable feeling about being around alcohol, but how did your relationship with alcohol change into motherhood?
Well, not dramatically, because probably, once like you get used to like the early mornings and you start to creep back into going out and stuff. It was a really bizarre time, because I was a single mother. I was only 23. I was only still very young, and I still wanted to be able to go out and enjoy elements of socializing. but also raising a child. But I was in a very fortunate position where I had a nanny, but I was also working. I was doing Joseph in the West End. So I was navigating so many new things, being a mum, very quickly being a single mum. Like, I think Corey was only maybe not even 10 weeks old when I was a single mum. Wow. When Darren and I split up. So it was all still very new, but I was also doing the show in the West End, so I had to have a full-time nanny to help. So you had Corey in the dressing room, so, you know, would feed Corey, would go out on stage, would come back. The rest of the cast were going out for the evening into London, and then I was like, well, sometimes I'd go home, sometimes I wouldn't. Sometimes I'd go for a few drinks. And then when you realise that you can't handle a few drinks, then get up with a crying baby at 4 a.m, you're like, oh, right, I've got to knock that on the head for a bit. Yeah. But then you get used to it, and you're young, and you practice it, and you go, okay, I'm fine now. And then, he's suddenly 6 months, 8 months old, and, you can do a little bit more. But, so I kind of, weirdly, and I could probably imagine most parents or most mothers would potentially admit to this. You eventually, once you get through that first year, figure out how you can fit in a social life around being a parent. And you do. And you tell yourself this story that you need it, that you need that time, and it's important that you have it. Now, don't get me wrong, you do need the time. But I think you tell yourself a bit of a lie that you need that time to go and drink, when actually what it's going to do is cause havoc on your mental health, when your hormones are still raging and all over the place, and then still coming back to care for a young toddler and a young baby. It's not easy.
That's like so incredible, like to be 23, to be thrown into that. And I was going to ask, like, then having to walk on stage in front of people, like, were you able to just switch off your mind? Because I know for me, like, I can a little bit, but my brain still's going a million miles an hour. But for you in the public eye, that must have been quite something.
Yeah, I got used to that in Hearsay. Every weekend there was a story about one of us, and then we had to go and do an interview. So I have an art of being able to switch it on and put a smile on my face and actually work through it. And it was a really difficult time. There was one show in particular, because it was plastered all over the papers, mine and Darren's relationship, and it was very well known that he had got fired from Joseph because he was playing Joseph and I was playing the narrator. I was about to say,
because I think I remember him being Joseph, right?
Yeah, so we were both in the show together. It was like a Valentine's special. We'd open the show, and he had basically his addiction got the better of him. Literally, the minute Corey was born, I hadn't seen him for days because he was off doing drugs. Wow. And so at that point, again, the addiction had got the better of him. He'd left on Mother's Day and just never came back because he went to go and find drugs. He said he was going to get a curry, and he went and got drugs and then just didn't see him. But that's addiction for you. Yeah. And, seeing it firsthand, it's awful and it's not nice. But yeah, so basically all of our story was all over the papers. And I think to be able to afford drugs, he'd sold a story to the News of the World and said that we'd broke up. So I found out that our relationship had ended in the paper, like reading it. Like I still hadn't spoken to him because he was in the depths of addiction. Yeah. And so that day I had to go on stage. Obviously, the producers knew that he'd gone rogue and was missing. And then, then I remember somebody in the audience shouting out, "You can do this, Susie." And it really choked me up. And I was like, the sing for the narrator was very difficult, as it is normal. And we had to lower the key because I'd only just given birth. My diaphragm wasn't working very well. We were really trying to make this part work for me, when the reality is I shouldn't have gone back to work 7 weeks after having a baby. Yeah. I shouldn't have worked with my partner who was heavily was a drug addict. It was just all set there for a disaster. But the show must go on, and you have to do it. And at the time, I'd also got bronchitis, and it was a tough old time.
For me, you were up against it.
Absolutely up against it. But you do, and as we know in showbiz, we say the words, "The show must go on," and it does, to the detriment of your health. It does. And the reality is, at that point, I should have just gone home and been a mum and had that time out and kind of dealt with the grief of not being with my partner, that all kind of crumbling around me, and dealt with the new life of becoming a single mum, and all at the age of 23. But you're trained in showbiz to just carry on regardless. And I got really good training in hearsay, so I just did. And I did for a really long time, probably only up until recent years.
Did you at the time understand addiction, or was it more, because it's quite a, hindsight's a beautiful thing, like we can sit here now with more like understanding and more knowledge about the topic, but it must have been quite difficult to understand at 23.
It was. I didn't understand it like I do now, and for the record, like I don't ever feel like I went to addiction. Mm-hmm. I just felt like my relationship with alcohol was really grey area. And I think that's because I lived with an addict and I saw how bad it was and what it looked like being an addict. Now, people could argue with me saying, well, if you had an unhealthy relationship with alcohol, that's addiction too. I don't believe that. I think you have this scale, and you have, this scale where you aren't able to moderate, and you're anywhere from this side to that side. And I was very much over the middle, but I wasn't into the point where I had to go to rehab to be able to stop. I was able to navigate that myself, and I would take big breaks from alcohol and feel amazing from it. And I think when I lived like living with addiction, I think I recognized it before I got there, to go, this is starting to look familiar to me, and this isn't pleasant, and it doesn't make me feel nice. So totally can't remember what your question was.
just about the subject of addiction, like whether your understanding of it at the time.
So I think like my understanding of it was, it looked one way to me, and I think it very much anchored around drugs and what that looked like. My understanding to it wasn't very compassionate. I was like, certainly when I was with Darren, I was like, just snap out of it. You've got everything you could wish for, and all you're doing is destroying it. I didn't realise how awful the disease was. Now I have obviously a lot more compassion for what he was going through.
Sure.
But I just thought he was being selfish, and that he didn't love me, didn't love what he had got, didn't love his son. And he was willing to give all of that up and walked away from it. And I absolutely hated him for years for that. And it's not until, again, I think my own journey, my own experience of coming away and speaking to other people with addiction, and being within the sober community, that I have nothing but love and compassion for, the father of my child, and feel that he has to fight every day. And that is... It's awful to see that he still has that fight daily. Yeah,
I think it's really fascinating. It took me a long time, having lost my dad to drug addiction when I was a kid, when I used to get drunk myself, and I'd get home and I'd be upset, and I'd be like, why would you choose to leave your kid? Why would you choose to do these things? And it wasn't till I went sober, and I was the same as you. I think you were the same. I don't think either of us would ever say we were addicts, but we were probably very unhealthy relationships of alcohol. But then you can look at it and be like, I don't think that was ever a choice. I don't think anyone would ever actively choose to do it. They are so unwell. Yeah. And we're quite venomously open with our perspective on that, I think, on the podcast, which is I don't think, someone can always choose to have the first drink. Someone can always choose to have the first line. And Matthew Perry spoke very actively and openly about that, about it was his choice to have the first thing. But I think some people are just made up in a certain way where it becomes a real struggle, and therefore to demonize them, I think only compounds how bad it is. But I don't think anyone really talks about it enough at the time. So the default is you're an asshole, because I think we'd all naturally go that way, right? Because you're living it.
Yeah. And I did for years think that about him, and I think is only natural, like you say, when you don't have that addiction, or you aren't in that depth, you would automatically think, just snap out of it. You can do something about this. You are choosing not to want to do something about it. But then, like I said, just really now understanding that some people just don't have that mental resilience to have that choice, that they just, it's not so straightforward. There's so many layers to it, and like different mental health, like, you know, ADHD, ASD, you know, OCD, you know, there's lots of mental health disorders that we now know about, and we are now talking about so much more openly, that layer this addiction, and that, you know, you can now realize that the brain is different, wired differently to somebody who can absolutely moderate and does not find alcohol an offence. Doesn't find it offensive.
And that's it as well, isn't it? Like all those neurological things, then link that back to nurture, how we were brought up, the things that were around us, the trauma we may have suffered. Like there's no surprise that some people go a certain route.
Yeah, exactly.
So for you, I guess your journey into maybe realizing you needed to stop, when was that, and how did that start?
I think I used alcohol as a crutch. I definitely, as soon as Hearsay was over, that was then the beginning to my journey. I didn't identify that until later on. I think it was just a way for me to quieten the mind, to stop the overthinking, and to be able to escape from my own reality. And I used it so much for that. Now, there were times where I could really take big breaks, and I would, because I love health, I love fitness, I love feeling good. But it was the mind that stopped me. Like that mind-body connection was like, my body did not like it. And of course, my mind didn't like the way alcohol, the impact that alcohol had on it. But I didn't want to live that way. But I did, because I went along with society. I went along with it because the mind chatter was so frantic for me. And now I know, like being diagnosed with ADHD myself later on in life, the pieces are now coming together. Like, that's why I had the unhealthy relationship. It's why I couldn't moderate. I couldn't stop when I had the one. And now I understand that a little bit more. And I'm very, very early in the days of understanding my diagnosis. And I'm sure there's so much more I will discover with that. I think the start of that unhealthy relationship was just always there. And it just built up over the years until I was at the point where I was like, enough, I can't live this way anymore, because I'm going to lose everything. I am looking like that addiction will be the only place I'm going to be able to stay and reside. And I didn't want that for my life, because I'd seen how it destroyed everything around you before, you know, from my experience with, you know, living with an addict, and then even like from childhood as well, like how you can lose everything you love. And, you know, I think it took me longer to get there than it should have done. But certainly, like, I'd say from 2009, 2010, people would say to me, like, you know, you're drinking a lot, or, you know, can you take it easy, or slow down, you're drinking very fast when you're out, like, we can't keep up with you. Those kind of comments would start. And then when my dad passed away in 2012, I just seemed to really, like, that I drink alone a lot. And that was the first time I noticed that I would have it at home and drink and drink and drink and just completely want to escape me. And that was the only way I knew how to, was to drink.
And you were quite self-aware of it then at the time?
Yeah.
It was happening?
Yeah, I was very self-aware of it. I was recognising that, I think just that, it's funny, isn't it, drinking? You're shamed for not drinking, but you're shamed for not being in control of drinking. Yeah. And I felt shamed for not being in control of drinking. And now I feel shamed for not drinking. Yeah. You can't fucking win.
It's interesting because, like, people often say when they've had issues with drinking that if someone tells them they've got an issue with drink, they're just like, no, I don't. Were you defensive about it, or were you kind of like, yeah, I'm struggling?
I think I used my excuses, because I was very good at going, okay, well, I'm going to show you that I don't have a problem with drinking, take a month off. And I could take a month off, and I'd really focus on my health. And then it'd be like, right, well, I've not got a problem with drink, have I? So we're now at a pub or a wedding or a party. I'll now have the drink. And then inside I was like, I'll just moderate now. This is now my opportunity. Yeah. I know how to moderate. And then very, very quickly, within like 2 or 3 drinking occasions, I was right back where I was of not being able to moderate, and I couldn't, and that was my problem. And I think that's where people shamed me. It's like, why can't you just stop now? You've had enough. You've passed out. And I would fall asleep in lots of places because I'd just drunk way over my ability to be able to handle it, and would just fall asleep.
Yeah, and the more we know about alcohol and the science behind it as well, we know that actually it's quite normal, because you lose your inhibitions and you lose that part of the brain that allows you to go, oh, well, I've had enough, let's just call it a day and go home. That's just gone. You're like, next thing you know, you're asleep and you wake up somewhere and you're like, shit. You know,
exactly.
I don't think
I'm in the panto.
Shit.
But yeah, I mean, was there, so it's up to the moment where you stopped drinking and called it enough, was there like a specific night, or was it just like culmination of everything and you went, enough's enough?
Yeah, there was a lead up. There was like a 2-year period. So after my dad died, I did like, I think that's when I was aware and probably trying to hide my unhealthy relationship a little bit.
Sure.
I think I was very conscious of it. And then I got with a new partner and we had a kid. So then again, a big break from alcohol. And then it was ages till I started drinking after I had Rafi, because I was breastfeeding for quite a while. And I just didn't want to feel it. And I was really struggling with my mental health. Again, not knowing that I was suffering with ADHD, and I would go to the doctors and they would ramp up my antidepressants. And now we know that was the completely wrong medication that I needed to be on.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to escape the head. That's all I ever wanted to do, was escape the fact that I couldn't focus, or my thinking was just so overwhelming. And so I had the time off when I was, I think it must have been about 6 months, 8 months when I started to drink again. And funnily enough, I could moderate to start with. I would just have the one. I must have had this willpower that I was able to do that at this time. And then it very quickly crept back in until it was really obvious to me that I just was never going to be somebody who could handle the drink. And I think the older I was getting, the way your hormones change, you just can't handle it like you used to be able to. You can't get away with it. You can't hide that you're a bit of a party animal. You can't hide the fact that you just take it a little bit too far. And I was waking up, like, just even after having a few drinks, really feeling the effects of it. I could handle it less. I was getting more sloppy. I was falling asleep at more places. I once fell asleep at a charity, and I think this was one of the final nails in the coffin. I'd had this 2-year period of being able to take big breaks from alcohol, getting into my fitness and feeling amazing, then going to a party, having a drink, not being able to moderate, being back to where I was. Then I'd do Sober October and have the big break, and then I'd feel amazing. Then the Christmas period would come and I'd feel crap again, and then I'd do that for another year and then another year. And I was like, why can't I just stop? Because I cannot moderate. This is the problem. I cannot moderate. No matter how much I try and train myself to do this, no matter how long I take off alcohol, I am back to square one within the matter of a handful of nights out. And I got to the point where I was just literally like, enough was enough. I wanted to feel better. I wanted more for myself. I wanted to stop hating myself and that self-sabotaging that came with the alcohol. So every time I did drink, it wasn't even I want a good night out. It was, I dislike myself so much, so I'm going to drink. I'm going to drink because I hate myself and I just want to pass out and I just want to forget about my thoughts. And I just wanted that to stop. And I wanted to be a different person. And the only way I could do that was purely to look at myself in the mirror and start loving me. Start showing myself some goddamn respect and stop it and knock it on the head. Because all I was doing was I was being the clown for everyone else to have a laugh at. I was being the person who, you can come over to my house and you can all stay over and we'll all have a big night, to the detriment of my mental and physical health and to the detriment of my family as well. And I generally had to get so mad with myself and go, enough's enough, just stop it now, stop drinking. And then at the start of 2020, I was like, that's it, I'm quitting drinking and I'm going to go a whole year without drinking, because I knew I'd done 8 weeks, I'd done 3 months, I'd done like the big periods. I knew if I got through that entire year, that would be the making of me, and be able to go, that's it, I'm no longer a drinker. But I had to do that. I'm going to quit for a year to tell my friends and family, can you support me? Because I just want to get through this year without drinking. And some friends were like, well, when you're back drinking, give us a call. And when you're back drinking, we can go on holiday again. And I knew in the back of my head, no, if I'm doing a year, this is me out. Yeah. I am out of drinking. Yeah. I'm never returning back to it.
That's amazing, though.
Yeah.
So start of 2020.
Start of 2020.
And then what happens in March of 2020? Because for a lot of people, that was a really difficult period.
And I thought to myself, I've got to get out of jail free card, because the series of events that happened to this lead up. So I did the dry January, which is always the hardest. It's the first 4 weeks are the hardest of them all. Once you can get through those first 4 weeks, it gets easier. And so dry January for me was living off Heineken Zero and no Secco was the new thing that was out that year.
Yeah, I remember.
And it was awful. I was like, on a
so
sweet and just shaking off like a sugar high. Very quickly knocked that one on the head. But that was that transition. Like I needed those placebos to get me through that first month. And then my partner had done dry January with me, so that was really helpful, like to get me through those first 4 weeks, which was good. But then on the 1st of Feb, he was like, let's go out for a meal, because I want a pint, because it's like I've got through dry January.
No.
And I remember frantically writing down all the reasons why I cannot drink. Like, it will just turn into disaster. I will not be able to moderate. I will hate myself the day after. Like, just kept reminding myself. And then I wrote down what I was going to order at the bar, and that I was going to have a ginger ale, and that was my drink. And I had to go look back at my notes whilst we were having the meal. Every time my mind was going, just have the wine, just have a glass of wine. It's all right, you've done a month. You know, you can moderate now. And your mind chatter was just saying to you, just have the one, just have the one.
You're like, no, remember the game plan.
No, game plan. I had to own my decision so much and have that fire in my belly. So we got through February, and then I was on doing this one-woman show on a cruise ship. I was doing all the songs from the musicals with Suzanne Shaw in the Limelight Lounge on P&O ferries.
Nice.
And I'd done it a few times before, had an MD, and flew out to Barbados, meant to be meeting my MD out there. He didn't show up that evening. I thought, well, maybe he's going straight on the ship, because he was flying from another ship in Miami to come and meet me. And so we got onto the ship, and he still hadn't turned up. And I'm starting to panic. Like, I need my MD to be able to do my show. And because we had loads of duets together as well.
Right.
I was like, oh my God, this is awful. Anyway, ship's gone out for sale, and I'm running around. Like, has he checked in? And everyone's like, no one had seen him, and he hadn't actually got onto the ship. So we're out sailing, and I've got a show in 3 hours that evening. And I'm like, what the hell am I going to do? So I found another MD on the ship, and I was like, can you do these songs? Then I had to find some more sheet music to do some more songs to make up for the ones that I didn't duet with him on. It was awful. And the MD did not want to, on his night off, play for me. I was like, please do me a favour. And he clearly didn't want to play. So much so, I was doing my set and he played everything double speed. And I was like, this is awful.
Oh my God.
The Hills were alive with the sound of music.
Yeah, no, it was like literally doing, I dreamed a dream when time come by, when I hope a time of life. And I'm like singing it so fast. And then when it came to Pure and Simple at the end, because it was like an acoustic version, it was like meant to be really slow. I was like, this is just awful. And I used to have these nightmares that I didn't know what I was doing when I'd go on stage, and that the audience would start pointing and laughing and going, oh, she's caught out. That basically happened to me on that ship.
It was of Pure awful.
And Simple. Yeah. Ooh. And so then the day after, I had to get some backing tracks instead, because I couldn't use the pianist anyway. So I thought to myself at the end of that, I was like, I've got 2 more nights to go of shows, and I'm going to have a drink. Because this has been like the worst experience. The worst part about it was I was then on a beach. I'd kind of got off the ship, went on the beach, got a phone call off P&O ferries going, he's now officially a missing person, because this guy, my MD, had gone missing.
Oh my God.
Gone completely missing. So I'm like, this is awful.
I
like,
thought this was going down a COVID route, not a...
No, he'd gone missing. I mean, I was hoping that like the ship that he was on had gone into lockdown.
Yeah.
But he'd gone completely missing. Then there was talks of Italy going into lockdown. We were on this ship and I was thinking, I've got one more show. I'm going to have a drink. I'm going to have to have a drink after this. This is awful. I've got a get out of jail free card here to at least have a drink. This is just like such awful circumstances. But I don't know what had changed in me. I was just like, no, because you know how it's going to end.
Yeah.
And this is not going to help. Anyway, got off the ship, got home. That ship 5 days later had gone into lockdown for 8 weeks.
So people were stuck on it for 8 weeks.
Stuck on that ship for 8 weeks. If that had been my fate, I think I wouldn't be here doing this interview with you today.
Honestly, I would have turned into a mermaid. I would have been straight off that ship, flopping around in the ocean.
I definitely would not have been sober. I would have been drinking again. And then got home, and then it turned out that the MD that I've been working with so many times was a massive drug addict, and I never even knew.
Oh.
Like, he got off at Miami on the ship,
Just
and
went
then went on one.
Dangerous place.
Yeah.
Miami's a dangerous place.
Is
he okay now? Do we know?
Yeah. Sorry,
do we know where he is now?
Is he safe? Yeah. He's now safe. He's back. I don't know what he's doing with his life, but yeah. But I was like, oh my God, did not see that one come in. So then I came home. Then everyone went into lockdown, and I'd done at this point 90 days sober. And I kept saying to myself, because suddenly we had that change in the seasons.
Yeah.
And I think when you go sober, we don't talk about this enough, the change of seasons and that temptation to want to drink. Mm-hmm. And I just wanted that first crisp white wine. Yeah. Glass of white wine.
Because that first summer of lockdown was wild.
It was like the summer of destiny, wasn't it?
It was like from April onwards, like, oh, hey guys, you're going to do nothing.
Yep.
And here's access to everything.
Yeah, exactly. And I kept saying to myself, just get to 100 days. Get to 100 days, and if you still feel like you want to have that drink, you genuinely have got a get out of jail free card. We've gone into COVID. There's a worldwide pandemic here. Like, if there's any time you can, it's now. And I'd been in contact with 1 Year No Beer, and they wanted to do a podcast recording because they'd seen like a recent post that I'd announced that I've been sober. And I announced that I'd taken a break from alcohol and that I wanted to do this whole year without drinking to keep me accountable, because I found myself wanting these urges to go back to old ways. And I said to myself, like, if I can just do that interview, I'll see how I feel afterwards, and then I'll just go from there. I did the interview, and then afterwards I thought, shall I have the drink? And I was past it. And I was like, no, why would I ruin it now? 100 days sober. This is now my chance to completely focus on my health. And there's an opportunity now, whilst we're all in lockdown, you know, people were doing fitness classes. I thought, talk about it. Talk about, you know, your sober journey. I'd also gone plant-based, so I wanted to do like cook-alongs.
Yeah, nice.
And do some fitness classes with some friends of mine who are PTs. So I just thought, just throw yourself into health. Make that something you dedicate your life to from now on. And then there's no looking back. And then, so that was it. So it was kind of history. And here I am.
4 years later.
4 years.
That's
4
incredible,
years later.
You must feel really proud of yourself.
I am, massively.
Yeah.
Massively proud. I mean, you know what it's like. You know, when you think you're against the odds and that you're never going to be able to do it, and that, you know, you self-sabotage yourself and you tell yourself a story that you can't. You're not the person who can do that. And then you are. It's amazing.
And when you're known as that person as well. I was definitely like the party guy.
Exactly.
The facilitator. It was always at my house. It was always me having the party, me inviting people over. So that's because then you're trying to like, oh, okay, cool, I can quit the booze. But then who is anyone going to view me at? Like, what's the version of me that people are now going to
And
see?
that's the journey you have to go on, because I think you do have to grieve the old you. And there was that period, like for me, it was around about 18 months where I started to grieve the old me, because I'd been and had my life of being alcohol free in lockdown, that then I had to learn how to be alcohol free socializing. And I had to grieve my friends and my family members that didn't want to be around me, or we had to change that relationship. And that was that was a hard period. I remember getting quite emotional about having to grieve that life and move into a different life.
That's interesting. I mean, how did I know you talked about it, so ADHD diagnosis, and also I guess part of the function of alcohol for you was to kind of quieten your brain. How did you deal with that sort of side of stuff?
Yeah, so again, because this diagnosis is literally, it's been a matter of weeks I've had the diagnosis, and now I'm literally having to figure lots of things out and put that jigsaw piece together myself. But I think instinctively that's why I had to focus on my health.
Sure.
So I'd calm, and I think that's why running has become a big part of my journey with quitting alcohol, because it's meditative. You know, I can get into a really meditative state, and not just running, like long distance running, like insane, crazy distances are the thing that help me really calm my thinking. And I do need tools. I do need tools to help me, and that is to eat as well as I can. It is to get good sleep. It's to keep hydrated. It's to keep the dopamine hits from exercise. And that's why, you know, so many people have commented on, even like friends and family members, you run too much, you exercise too much, you calm down. I need that. I need that in my life, because I don't naturally create the dopamine hormone that, you know, general people, you know, can create. And so I need to seek it. I need to find it. And I've got to micromanage that, because there's I can go too far. If I go to burnout, then I will absolutely crash. But then if I don't do enough of it, I will absolutely crash as well. And so I have to completely micromanage my life. And before, I had no awareness to that. And so instead, drinking was my only coping mechanism to control my ADHD, because anything else that I had, like the antidepressants that I was on, just they weren't working, because they were giving me serotonin boosts, and it wasn't serotonin that I needed, it was dopamine I needed. So, you know, it's now figuring that out, which, like I said, it's so early, this diagnosis, that I need to do a lot more research on it, and I'm going through coaching, and I'm going to see if medication is suited for me. But what I do naturally is helping me maintain it. It's just, for me, now I'm going through the perimenopause, it's the focus that I'm losing. Like being able to focus.
It's fascinating, because that's actually something we're looking at researching more this season, is the links between sort of ADHD, OCD, and alcohol and addiction. Because, like you say, I think if you probably broke down a lot of people that have had struggles with alcohol and addiction, I reckon there's probably some form of undiagnosed base layer there at some point.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
I think so. I mean, lots of research to do on that, but I certainly think there's a link there to ADHD and ASD and addiction, and, like you say, OCD as well, because it's a coping mechanism. It's the easiest, most accessible coping mechanism, and that's where my energy has changed towards the world and alcohol. And I think that we need to change so much, and it's none of my business what people do with their lives and how they live it. Because I'd be a massive hypocrite if I was to criticise those who drink, because for so long I didn't know another life, and I didn't know how to socialise without drink. But, and there is a big but here, like, things have to change, because alcohol has zero benefits to your health, regardless whether you are able to moderate or not. It has zero benefits. But what it does do, it causes crime. It's causing the NHS billions of pounds because of emissions and deaths to do with alcohol. It's causing fractured families and, like, the pain within, like for children in their childhood. Like, now I can link back to my childhood and see how that was painful for me, and where trauma was, and where potentially ADHD started, because that is, you know, it's from trauma as well as genetics. And so there has to be change, and it might be that there's uncomfortable conversations and people will not like that. But for me, I certainly will not quieten my voice, because society doesn't like to be told not what to do. Because I think it's important. We are shown so much advertising that drink's sexy, it's what we do, it's how we have fun, it's how we socialise. But the more of us need to make more of an effort to say, hold on, there's a life that is sexy and lovely and wonderful and joyous and nutritious and so beneficial to us in other ways. And you can have fun, and you can have a brilliant time and a brilliant life without it. But I do think we're going to have to get uncomfortable with those conversations. And it's so easy to sit on the fence and go, well, you do you and I'll do me. no, we need to talk about this more because it's extremely damaging for so many lives and peoples and families and you know, like I said, and for something that has zero health benefits.
I love that perspective. And it's interesting because someone messaged our podcast yesterday and asked a question, do you think the opposite of addiction is connection? And it was really poignant for Tom and I, because I sort of said, I think in addiction, you're seeking connection, whether that be with yourself or with someone. And the idea that actually for me, sobriety has brought connection to myself, to my family, to my friends, to new relationship, given me purpose and actually enabled me to have such a better understanding of the world and how I want to live and how I want to pass that on.
Yeah.
I think these conversations are so important.
Oh, they are so, I couldn't agree more, because we ignore them. We don't get uncomfortable with that awkwardness. Like, you know, when you're talking to your friends about being sober, I don't know about you guys, but certainly for a long time I watched my words because I didn't want to offend anybody. I didn't want to look like I was being preachy or judgy. But screw that. I think we have to go to that point where it becomes preachy and judgy, to go, no, we've got to look at it differently, like we did with smoking. Like, we know that is incredibly unhealthy for our lives and, you know, what that does to us. Yet alcohol is far worse on so many levels because of how much damage it has to those around you as well.
Yeah, and I think alcohol alters the mind a lot more than, say, smoking
of course
does.
It
and
does,
that's what, you know, I always look back to, say, certain relationships or friendships, like, would that argument have happened if we weren't both drunk? No. Would that fallout have happened if we weren't both drunk? No. Would that awful thing have happened if we weren't both drunk? No. So, like, what's the key cause root issue of so many of these bad things have happened in my fucking life?
So many.
Drink.
Yeah.
99% of all.
And if you were to go out into a pub now and listen to people's conversations and that miscommunication of people not really understanding what people are saying because they're not listening and they're jumping in, they're not really having a full conversation. Like, you listen to, like, how crazy it is. I went to a comedy night in Edinburgh this weekend, and there was a few people sat on our row who were extremely drunk and falling off their seats. And people are looking over, and it didn't affect my life too bad. It was annoying, but, like, they were speaking to each other and they weren't listening and they weren't getting it right, and then they started an argument and it was like, and then the beers fell everywhere and the glasses smashed and they're trying to clear everything up and they're going, no, I'll do it, and they were causing more havoc. And it was like, all because you've got absolutely blind drunk.
Yeah, it's so, like, and I think the more time you have away from alcohol, the clearer everything becomes like that, and you go, fuck, I'm so glad I don't do this anymore.
I know.
But that's great. Well, before we come to the big three, just wanted to touch on the things that you found most beneficial since getting sober. So how's family life been?
Like dramatically different. Like, to be able to spend time with my children fully in the moment and do things. We're a lot more outdoors. We've got a camper van now. We
Amazing.
Go camping. I never went camping before. I used to be this person. I don't know why, because I love it so much, but I used to be this person who was like, hotel or nothing at all.
I was the exact same.
I couldn't stand the outdoors.
Fucking get me outdoors.
Exactly. You know, you need to be nourished with the nature. So yeah, much more outdoors as a family. You know, everything is around health. Like, my cooking's different. Like, I feed my children, not convenience. I cook. We cook together. We talk about food. We talk about stuff. We play cards. We do old school stuff.
Amazing.
Before it was like, have your iPad and leave mummy alone and we're going to order a McDonald's.
Yeah.
And that was our life because I was, you know, battling through a hangover.
Yeah. Well,
So
that's really good to hear. So that's a massive positive change. How about work?
Work is very different. I'm less, at the moment, less in the entertainment industry and more doing work within the wellness industry.
Amazing.
And I'm going through a transition, and it's I'm braver. Like, I would just opt for, okay, go on tour with a musical and be away from your family. And in lots of ways, I like that because it enabled my drinking habits, and I wasn't able to then have to worry about getting up for the school run. And, you know, it was like to have a drink and then you've got a show in the evening, but you're away. So work is very different. I don't want to be away from my family, so I'm no longer on tour with a show. And like I said, you know, I do so much more different work. Like for example, like I'm an alcohol-free coach. I'm a lifestyle coach. Like I help people with their well-being. Like I went away and did a diploma, and just making those changes for my own accountability as well has been amazing. Love so that. Yeah. Like never in a million years would I have thought I would have done anything but perform. But now I love it.
And now you're helping others perform, which is a beautiful thing.
Yeah, exactly.
It's weird where the sobriety world takes us, because we never thought we'd be doing a sobriety podcast.
No, definitely
not. This was an idea that Jamie came to. We were at a festival together and spoke about the idea, and then we went a little bit longer in our sobriety journey and then put it together and did it. And like I said, just didn't think we were doing this, but we're loving doing it, and it's like you say, it's important to have these conversations, and more people are. The more we talk about it, the more normalised it becomes, and the more that kind of spreads. And I
think alcohol makes you afraid of failure because you put a comfort blanket around you. So for me now, not drinking, I'm like, I'm gonna try this fucking thing, and if it doesn't work, cool, because I've given it my best shot. I mean, we're gonna leave here and go write our live show. That's ludicrous to me. Like, what? But like,
it's
and
amazing.
If it fails, it fails, because we're gonna do it.
Yeah, and well done, and congratulations. It won't fail.
Please to God, can it not fail?
It's nearly sold out already, guys, actually, so...
That's incredible, though, and how amazing that is. And, congratulations, and so well-deserved, because it's a subject that we do need to speak more about. But it's so funny you say that, it makes you braver not drinking, when the irony is you think you get the bravado from the drink, and actually it just makes you a weaker man, doesn't it? It makes you just have this false sense of identity that you think you are, this is the way life should be. And I think when you knock the booze on the head, you become a much more real, genuine person. I don't know about you guys, but I don't, and it's nothing I'm proud of, but I didn't have much compassion back in the day. It numbed my compassion. I think that with the concoction of antidepressants and alcohol just made me compassionateless. And suddenly I've found everything's become much more colourful, and I'm so much more grateful and appreciate the flowers and the plants and the smells and the smiles of strangers, and everything becomes much more alive and beautiful.
I fully agree. My biggest thing is I just love talking to baristas in coffee shops. Since I've gone and hey, how are you? How's your day? And they're probably thinking fuck off, I've got a queue here. But to me, it's just that connection. Coming back to that point a minute ago of just with strangers is really beautiful.
I also like deep conversations as well. I don't know about you. I mean, I think one of the reasons why I drunk so heavily is that I hate small talk. It is the worst.
I literally despise it so much.
And I think why people drink if they are out in the bar is to deal with small talk. It's just a way to kind of get through, and then just to end up talking nonsense. When you don't drink, my questions won't just be oh, how's your day? It's when's the darkest moment in your life?
You
go deep. You go
about your closest death experience.
You go so deep so quickly, don't you? You're just I want to know about you and how you work, because I love fascinating conversations.
I couldn't agree more.
You're looking at me like it's time for the big three.
I think it is.
Is it time for the big three?
Yeah.
Right.
After you, my liege.
Firstly, to anyone thinking about going on a journey of sobriety, what's the single best piece of advice you could give?
Anyone thinking about going on the sobriety adventure? Well, I think the best advice really is you're never going to lose anything. You're only going to gain. And so if you do go on or try a sober month or a sober 2 months or 3 months or forever, is to just focus on the gains and not what you're missing out on, because it is a delusion that you are losing. You're not, you're gaining, so you must focus on the gains.
Love that.
Yeah, that's very poignant. I love that.
Gains and gains.
Secondly, what is the single best thing that sobriety has brought you so far?
It's given me my life back. It really has. Before alcohol was stealing my life. It was continuing to keep me in this trap. It was the narcissistic partner I did not need, and it was nice to finally close the door on them and say goodbye and throw the boxes out and tell them to fuck right off. And I've got my life back.
Amazing.
I love that. That's really powerful, actually, and I fully agree. Narcissism is a word I don't think is brought up enough around alcohol. Yeah. I think it's very, very, very apt. And finally, we would love Suzanne to write a letter to drunk Suzanne, starting Dear Suzanne.
So write a letter to drunk Suzanne. Oh, wow. Dear Suzanne, today you might not think this is possible, but tomorrow is going to be so much better if you choose you and your life. Don't worry about the missing out. Don't worry about the hard days you might find difficult not to join in with a drink, because tomorrow is always going to be much brighter and happier. And if you can persevere and start loving yourself, you can have anything you can ever wish for or dream for. And your family will finally get the mum they deserve. So sorry.
It was fine. You made me cry there. So that was amazing. Wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that.
Thank you. That's amazing.
It's always a scary question because some people don't engage with it, and some people, for me, like you, it really takes you
to a place where you don't.
But you should be so proud, and I'm sure everyone in your life's really fucking proud of where you've come to.
Yeah, I think just again, I think it's just being able to be the mum I should have been for so long. I think, I've got a big divide with my kids. I've got a 19-year-old who knew a very drunk me, and I've got a 8-year-old who doesn't know that version of me at all. Yeah. And I do have a little bit of guilt and shame that I need to work through with my eldest, like the life that he had to the life that my youngest has had. And I talk to him so openly about that. And I feel for Corey because he's got a dad who's an addict as well. And so, I just want him to, that for me has been a big turning point of where I'm proud that I'm able to at least have those uncomfortable conversations and talk about it, but also be proud that I was able to finally do it for my family and myself.
Yeah, that's amazing. And, I'm sure he's very proud of you as well.
Yeah, I think he is. Although I think sometimes he does wish that I would still get drunk and buy him loads of stuff on Amazon.
The guilt presents.
Yeah.
Have it all.
Yeah. Oh, what do you want? Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Let's go for a run.
Yes.
In Wickham. Let's do it.
Yes,
let's
Jamie.
do it. I've seen your 7 a.m. run clubs. So
yes,
let's do it.
Absolutely.
I'll drive by you and shout encouragement.
Well, you're not far.
Wankers.
You're like
run wankers.
We'll run to Reading.
Yeah,
and
do
make
that.
You come
Jesus
out.
Christ, no. Well, I think it's about marathon distance actually.
Yeah.
I think it's about 26-77 miles.
Cool.
Fuck it. Yeah, I'll do it.
You committed now.
Yeah.
So.
Should we do it?
But honestly, thank you so much. That was genuinely one of the best conversations we've had, if not I've ever had. That was stunning.
Yes.
So thank you.
Yes, I'm happy then. That's made me very happy. Thanks, guys.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Cheers.